In the still hours just before dawn, when the air hangs heavy with the breath of ancestors and the earth whispers its stories to those who listen, a young man named Elan sat by the edge of the forest, heart pounding like the wings of a startled sparrow. The winds had shifted. The world felt uncertain, and his spirit was tangled in the noise of doubt and fear. Elan had always trusted in the ways of his people, his grandfather's songs, his grandmother's prayers, the quiet guidance of the trees, the dance of firelight at the gathering circle. But this storm that brewed in his heart was not like others. It came not from the clouds or the rivers or the howl of coyotes in the night. It came from inside a voice that whispered of failure, of things too heavy to carry, of roads too steep to climb. As he sat beneath the great cedar, he heard Ida's still, strong voice carried on the wind, clearer than any drumbeat, deeper than any riverbed. Child of the earth, I am the maker of paths where there are none. I do not fear the storm, I calm it. Elan closed his eyes, breathing deep of the smoke that rose from the smoldering sage beside him. The scent brought him back to childhood, when his mother would cleanse him before a journey, and his father would whisper, "Walk with Creator, and you will never be lost. Do not tremble." The voice came again, gentle like a mother's lullaby, firm like a warrior's vow. Fear is a shadow, not a substance. It cannot hold you unless you let it. He opened his eyes to see the wind bend, the tall grass in waves, but not in violence. It was a dance, a movement of grace, like the sway of dancers at the harvest moon feast. The storm inside him softened. The worries, like brittle leaves, were carried away. "Let the world rage if it must," said the voice, "but do not let it steal your peace. I dwell not in the loudness of men, but in the quiet of your spirit. Be still, I am with you." Elan pressed his palm to the earth, feeling its hum. The ground beneath him, old as time, held no fear. The trees around him, scarred but strong, whispered not of panic but of patience. He looked to the sky not for signs, but for connection, and saw no lightning, only the gentle breaking of dawn. And in that golden light, he understood. God Wakan, Tonka, Creator, the one who walks with Uswas, not far off in thunder or hidden in mysteries. He was here, now, in the calm that follows trust, in the peace that takes root when fear is told to go, in the impossible that becomes possible when we stop wrestling and start listening. So Elan stood, heart no longer frantic, and stepped forward into the day, not because the road was easy, but because he knew now who walked it with him. Machines roared across the land where elk once ran freely. Smoke rose where trees once stood tall and proud. The rivers, once crystal clear, now carried the weight of men's haste and forgetfulness. People shouted more than they sang, ran more than they walked, and feared more than they prayed. And among them lived a woman named Ida, the first to dance. But these days her feet felt heavy. Her spirit, once light as eagle feathers, now bore the burden of mistakes, both hers and those of the world around her. She had spoken in anger to her sister. She had turned her eyes away from someone in need. She had forgotten her morning songs for many days. And worse, she felt the world itself was crumbling, fires in the mountains, floods in the lowlands, hearts hardening like sun-baked clay. Aida walked the ridge alone one morning, the valley below still asleep in mist. She spoke softly to the wind. "Creator, I have stumbled. The world has stumbled. Are you still near?" She waited, as her people had always done, not for thunder, not for signs in the sky, but for the quiet voice that lives between heartbeats. And then it came. "Child of the cedar and stone, even now my love surrounds you." Aida's eyes filled with tears not of sorrow, but of recognition. She had heard this voice in the stories of her elders, in the chants of the longhouse, in the quiet rustle of pine needles on a windless night. "The world may forget," the voice said, "but I do not. Even when you falter, I stand beside you. Even in chaos, I protect. My love is not like man's love that shifts with seasons. Mine is the river that flows through all time." She knelt, placing her palm against the earth, as her grandmother taught her. And beneath her hand, the ground felt alive and not broken, not dying, but breathing, still strong beneath the scars. Memories returned to her, how the deer had once returned to feed even after fire had touched the land, how her grandfather smiled even when his legs no longer carried him, how the sun always returned even after the longest night. Mistakes do not cancel my love, the voice whispered through the trees, and the chaos of man cannot break what I have woven. You are still mine. You are still under my wings. Aida rose slowly, the weight on her shoulders now lighter. The world was still loud, the mistakes still existed, but she knew she was not abandoned, she was not unworthy, and neither was the world. For the Creator was not waiting for perfection, he was walking beside his people in their imperfection, offering protection not only from the storms of earth, but from the storms within. Aida returned to the village that day, not to escape the chaos, but to walk through it with a different kind of strength, the kind that comes from knowing she was still loved, still held, still watched over. And in the wind behind her, the voice lingered like a song carried on eagle's wings. Even here, even now, my snow blanketed the ridges long before the moon of the falling leaves had passed. The wind whistled like old spirits, reminding the people of promises forgotten and paths left untended. In the small lodge at the edge of the forest, a young man named Tahoma sat alone, his breath visible in the stillness. He had not danced with his people at the last gathering. He had not sung the prayer songs when the first frost came. He had not spoken to the Creator in many moons. Shame hung on him heavier than the bear cloak on his shoulders. He remembered his grandfather's words, "When you break the sacred way, you must return with humility. The Creator does not abandon, but you must come back with your heart open." But Tahoma had not returned. He had stayed away, believing himself unworthy, his mistakes too many, his heart too distant. He had let anger guide his words. He had taken more than he gave. He had turned away when he should have stepped forward. And now he believed the Creator had turned away too. That night, the fire in his lodge burned low. The coals glowed faint, like the last warmth of a forgotten hope. But as the wind howled outside, a strange calm settled over him, not silence, but something deeper, as if the world itself had paused, waiting. And in that stillness came a voice not loud, not forceful, but strong like roots beneath stone. "Even now I fight for you." Tahoma sat still. He thought perhaps his mind was playing games, but the warmth in his chest grew. Not from the fire, but from something older, something sacred. "You have fallen, yes, but I do not forget you. I do not leave when the path grows crooked. I do not abandon because you stumbled." Tears came then, not from sadness, but from the breaking of something heavy, shame melting like snow under spring. "Son, I am not the voice of your guilt. I am the strength behind your rising. I restore, I rebuild. I remember who you are, even when you do not." Tahoma bowed his head. "But I have done wrong." The voice, soft as pine needles falling on snow, answered, "I have seen it. And still, I stay. Still, I cover you like the wings of the great thunderbird. You are not lost, you are returning." The fire suddenly sparked, its flame rising with unexpected life. He watched it dance, remembering the sacred fire circle, the drum beats, the chants of his people. The Creator had not closed the circle on him. The circle was waiting. He rose slowly, as if his spirit had grown lighter. He wrapped himself in his cloak, stepped outside into the snow, and looked up. Above him, stars stretched across the sky like a great woven blanket, familiar, eternal. Tahoma whispered, "Thank you." And the wind answered, not with words, but with a peace that wrapped around him like a promise. "You are not unworthy. You are not forgotten. I am still with you. I fight for you still." That night, Tahoma walked back toward the village not because he was fixed, not because he was finished, but because he was no longer afraid of the journey. The Creator had never stopped walking with him, not even once. The old woman sat by the river, where the water moved slow and steady, as it had for generations. Her name was Ayana, meaning eternal blossom, though most in the village simply called her grandmother. Children would run to her with scraped knees and curious minds, and she would smile like the moon smiles on quiet nights. But they did not know what she carried in her bones. There was a time when Ayana had cried to the stars until her voice broke, a time when hunger sat in her belly like stone, and grief followed her like a shadow that would not break away. She had lost a child to sickness in the winter moon, and a husband to war in the season of dry winds. She had wandered far into the forest one night, ready to let go of breath itself. And yet, she returned, not because her pain vanished, but because something in her spirit whispered, "There is more for you yet." Many moons passed. Seasons turned like the sacred hoop. She healed slowly, as the land does after fire. And though the ache never left entirely, it softened, like bark wrapping around a wounded tree. She began to attend the gardens again. She began to hum songs in the morning mist. She began to speak with the Creator not in anger, but in honesty. One evening, a young woman came to her face heavy with sorrow, hands shaking like leaves before the storm. She had lost her brother. She had lost her way. Grandmother Ayana did not speak right away. She simply held the girl's hand, thumb brushing over her knuckles like wind through tall grass. Then, in her soft, gravel-tinged voice, she said, "I know the cold that wraps around your bones. I know the silence that screams. I have sat with it. I have wept with it. But I tell you this, child, your suffering is not the end of your story." The girl looked up, eyes wide. "Pain changes us," Ayana continued. "It can hollow us outer, it can make room for something sacred. When you have walked through fire, you become the one who carries warmth to others. That is not weakness. That is purpose." She reached into the medicine pouch tied to her side and pulled out a small stone, smooth and warm. "This was in the river during the last flood," she said. "It was tossed, pressed, worn down. But now it is shaped by its journey, like you will be." The girl began to cry not from despair, but from recognition. She saw herself in the old woman's eyes, and for the first time, she saw a future where her sorrow could bloom into strength. That night, grandmother sat by the fire, the glow dancing in her wrinkled face. She remembered every trial, every night she thought she would not survive. And she whispered to the stars above, "Creator, thank you, not for the pain, but for the wisdom it gave, not for the loss, but for the light it helped me carry. Know it was never only for me." And the wind, gentle and knowing, brushed the feathers hanging at her door. In the early breath of morning, when the sky was still painted in soft blue and the trees whispered to one another through dew-kissed leaves, a young man named Dakota walked alone toward the sacred hill. His name meant friend to everyone, but he did not feel like a friend to himself. His spirit was restless, pulled in many directions. He had heard stories of the old ways of peace that settles like mist over a still lake, of blessings that follow when the heart walks the good path, but those stories felt far from his life now. He had grown tired from chasing things that disappeared like smoke. He had sought approval in the eyes of strangers, filled his days with noise, and still felt empty. So, he came to the sacred hill, as his grandfather once did, to listen. The sun rose slow and golden, spilling his light over the land like honey from the hand of Creator. Dakota sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and breathed deep. The wind danced through the tall grass and rustled the feathers tied to the staff he carried. He remembered his grandfather's voice. "When you do not know what comes next, go to the quiet. Creator speaks in the hush between thoughts." And in that hush, Dakota heard something not in words, but in knowing. It was an invitation, not loud, not demanding, just steady, like the drumbeat of the earth, a gentle calling, "Come close, walk with me. There is a path meant for you." He opened his eyes and looked around. The land itself seemed to glow with promise. Birds sang a melody older than memory. A deer stepped into view, unafraid. It looked at him as if it saw straight into his spirit. Peace stirred within him like a warm fire starting from ember. He opened his eyes and looked around. The land itself seemed to glow with promise. Birds sang a melody older than memory. A deer stepped into view, unafraid. It looked at him as if it saw straight into his spirit. Peace stirred within him like a warm fire starting from ember. Dakota stood slowly, heart lighter than before. He realized the invitation from Creator was not to a life of struggle or confusion. It was to a journey of trust, a path of faith where each step would be guided, a road where blessings would not be grabbed by force but would come like rain to the one who waits, who listens. As he walked back toward the village, his pace was unhurried. He smiled at the trees, the sky, the breeze that now felt like a friend. He remembered again what the elders said. The closer you walk to Creator, the more the world begins to speak in love. In the days that followed, Dakota began to chong a note with sudden thunder, but with quiet sunrise. He rose early to give thanks even for little things. He helped others without needing to be asked. He spoke softer, laughed easier, and when hard times came as they always do, he did not turn away from them. He met them with the knowing that he was not walking alone. People in the village began to notice. Dakota has a new spirit, they whispered. His steps are sure, his eyes hold peace. One evening, as the stars blinked into being and the fire crackled, a child asked him, "Uncle, why do you smile so often now?" Dakota knelt beside the child and said, "Because I accepted the invitation. Because I walk close to Creator now. And when you do that, blessings come no always in gold or gain, but in calm and purpose and love." And in the distance, an owl called out soft and strong a sign of truth, and the promise that peace is always near when one walks the good path. The winds were wild that season, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of many. There were whispers of war between neighboring clans, and hunger pressed in like a cold hand. Animals grew scarce, and the rivers ran lower than they had in many winters. Fear crept into the minds of even the strong, and many forgot the old teachings. Among the people, there lived a woman named Ayana. She was not known for great strength of body, nor did she lead the council or the hunt. But her spirit was firm, and her heart steady like the sun that never forgets to rise. Ayana carried with her something not many could see, yet it was her greatest Wapona truth whispered to her by her grandmother long ago. The word of Creator is your shield. Let it live inside you, and no fear can overcome you. She kept these words deep in her mind, tucked beside her prayers and her songs. Each morning before the sun stretched over the ridges, she would sit before the fire and speak the words passed down. Songs of life, stories of mercy, promises from Creator not written in books, but etched in spirit. One night, a great storm rolled across the land, thunder cracked like the anger of giants, and wind tore through the village with fury. Children cried, elders sat in silence, and many feared the worst. But Ayana remained still. She sat by the central fire, eyes closed, whispering words too old for most to know, words her grandmother once sang over her when she was a child afraid of shadows. Some gathered near her, drawn not by her strength, but by her calm. Her peace did not come from ignorance of danger, but from trust. She knew something deeper than the storm. She knew that fear loses its teeth when met with the word that lives. And so it was that the people stayed near her, listening. And as they listened, their breath slowed. Their hearts, once loud with worry, began to beat like the slow rhythm of the sacred drum. The wind still howled, but it no longer ruled them. The shield had been lifted, not one made of hide or bone, but of spirit and word. When morning came, the storm had passed. Trees had fallen, roofs had broken, but no lives were lost. The people looked to Ayana not as a savior, but as a reminder that the strength they needed was never far-reached, had only to be welcomed in. In the days that followed, others began to return to the old words. Around evening fires, they told stories not of fear, but of overcoming. Children learned the sacred songs again. Elders sat with pride as their wisdom found new roots. Ayana, still quiet, still humble, walked among them with a gentle smile. She did not claim power. She only repeated what was once given to her. Let the word of Creator dwell in you, like a seed planted deep. In drought, it will become your water. In danger, it will become your shield. And so it was that fear, though it came again in many forms, never ruled their hearts the same. Because now they knew not with the ears only, but with the soul that no shadow is greater than the light living within. There once lived a man named Dakota, whose name meant friend to everyone. He wasn't a great hunter, nor the strongest among the people. But when he walked through the village, even the babies stopped crying. His smile was like morning light slipping through the trees, soft but sure. His voice held warmth, like the fire that keeps elders from the cold. Dakota didn't heal the sick with roots or chants. He didn't speak visions from the mountain. But when he sat with someone in sorrow, it was as if the heaviness in their chest could finally breathe. His words were simple. He didn't speak many, but they came from a place so honest, so soaked in love, that they became medicine without needing to be wrapped in leaves or prayers. There was a young boy named Noden, wild as the wind his name carried. One day, he lost his father in a hunting accident. The boy ran from the village, howling into the forest, fists clenched, heart broken open like a cracked drum. Many tried to speak to him, but their words fell like dry leaves. He refused food, stopped laughing, and his eyes grew cold. One dusk, as the fire painted the village red, Dakota found him by the river, silent and still. He didn't speak right away. He sat beside him and let the stillness stretch. Then, without looking at the boy, he whispered, "When my brother died, I could not sing for many moons, but a bird kept landing on my roof each morning. It did not speak, it just sang. And one day I found myself singing back. Noden didn't respond, but he didn't run." The next evening, Dakota returned. This time, he brought a small carving ant eagle wings wide. He placed it beside Nodine. "You don't have to fly today," he said, "but one day you will feel wind again." A moon passed, then another. The boy began to eat again. His eyes, though still clouded with sadness, began to see light. One day, he came to Dakota and asked if he would teach him to carve. Dakota smiled and nodded. That was his way. No miracles, no lightning in the sky, just smiles that reached deep, words that settled like healing rain, and hands that reminded others they were never truly alone. His actions, though small in the eyes of many, moved like waves across still water, gentle, but reaching far. The people began to notice something. Those who sat with Dakota often changed, not always quickly, not always loudly, but always truly. Grief softened, anger melted. Joy returned like a forgotten song. One elder said, "Dakota carries the love of Creator like fire in his chest. Not the fire that burns, but the kind that cooks food, warms the cold, and lights the night." When Dakota grew old, his hair silver like snow on pine, children still ran to him. Mothers trusted him with their tears. Warriors came not for advice, but just to sit beside his peace. But from the simple truth, through his, Dakota answered, "I didn't know, I believed." Creator saw the faith and answered, "But the miracles didn't end with meat. That spring, the crops grew early. A woman who had long thought her womb was closed gave birth to twins. An elder near death stood again and walked without his cane. Doors opened where only walls had been. Still, Dakota remained humble. "None of this is mine," he said. "I only knocked on the door with a faithful hand." As years passed, people from other villages came to sit near Dakota, not because he was a chief, not because he was a healer, but because when he prayed, the air changed, lighter, clearer, full of hope. They came with broken hearts, broken dreams, and he would take their hands and say, "Your faith can make you strong, stronger than shame, stronger than fear. The Creator sees it. He delights in it, and he will bless it." Dakota never grew rich. He never asked for praise. But when he walked, trees leaned toward him. Birds rested near him. And the people smiled, feeling the power of a man who had trusted with every beat of his heart. In the end, they carved into stone near the lodge. He walked with faith, and faith moved the world for him. And it was true. For in the sacred way, strength is not always measured by muscle or might. Sometimes, it is in the quiet devotion that refuses to give up, even when the night is long. Sometimes, the greatest warriors are those who kneel not to surrender, but to pray. There was once a woman named Ahioka, which means she brought happiness. She was not born into power. Her family was poor, her voice quiet, yet from a young age, there was something in her eyes like fire resting behind gentle clouds. The elders said the Great Spirit had marked her, not with riches or easy paths, but with something greater, purpose. In the village, many had grown weary. Years of sickness and sorrow had dulled their laughter. Their songs were few, their dreams even fewer. Chains unseen, but heavy wrapped around hearts. The people walked, but without light in their steps. But Ahioka, she walked different. She spoke to the wind with joy. She prayed aloud when others kept silent. When someone was hurting, she sat beside them, her hands warm, her voice like river water soft but strong. Creator has not forgotten us, she would whisper. He sees, he listens, he moves. Some mocked her boldness. She is only a girl, they said. What can she change? But Ahioka was not afraid. She knew who had sent her. She stood one day in the middle of the gathering circle, drum in hand. Her voice rang out like eagle cry, clear and strong. We are not slaves to fear, she declared. We are children of the Great Spirit. Rise up, walk free. Speak life to the dry places. At first, there was silence. But then a boy who had not spoken in months laughed aloud. A widow raised her face to the sun. An old man stood tall and danced again. It began like a single spark in dry grass mall, unnoticed until fire caught. Ahioka kept walking from village to village, carrying no possessions but her words and her prayers. She told stories of hope. She laid hands on the broken. She sang over those who had forgotten how. Her message was always the same. You are not forgotten. Freedom is near. Chains do not last forever. People began to call her Messenger Woman, not because she was great, but because she carried greatness inside the power of the Creator, the boldness of faith. She did not ask permission to speak truth. She did not wait until all was easy. She simply trusted and moved. One night, a war party from a neighboring land came. Fear rushed through the people like cold wind. But Ahioka walked calmly to the center of the camp and began to sing not a song of battle but of peace. Her voice trembled the air, and the warriors, they lowered their weapons, one by one, until none remained. The people wept. Chains broke. Not the chains made of rope, but those made of doubt and despair. Ahioka looked at them and smiled. This is what the Spirit does when you live in His power. This is why I speak. This is why I go. She was never crowned, never praised by kings, but her name spread across lands, not as a queen, but as a voice, a flame, a herald of hope. Even now, the old ones speak of her. They say, live like Ahioka, walk bold, speak true, trust Creator. Let your life be the drumbeat that wakes the sleeping. And in this way, the story lives on.